Support for this program is provided by the men and women of the Louisiana Forestry Association. Through sustainable forestry, LFA members promote the health and productivity of Louisiana's forests for generations to come. And the Foundation for Excellence in Louisiana Public Broadcasting.
Good evening and welcome to Louisiana Public Square. I'm Beth Courtney.
And I'm Craig Freeman. Whether it's a reaction to a weak economy, a bitter healthcare debate, or what seems to be a year-round campaign mood for the two political parties, Americans currently have little trust in government. A recent poll from the Pew Research Center finds that 75% of Americans have an unfavorable view of Congress, the lowest rating the legislative body has received in the survey's 25-year history.
But the distrust is not just at the national level. When LSU's Public Policy Research Lab asked Baton Rouge residents what one word best describes your impression of Louisiana state politics these days, the top answer given was corrupt. Interestingly, the second answer given was good. So is the political climate in Congress destroying representative democracy, or is partisanship just reflective of a polarized electorate? And if the system is broken in Washington, what's the collateral damage to Louisiana?
Which, by the way, I think we have too many czars. We need to get rid of the czars.
In a year that has seen acrimony from both sides of the aisle, the health care reform debate highlights how toxic the political climate in Congress can get.
People will say that it's really partisan and really bitter, because I think it really is partisan and bitter right now.
James Carville served as strategist for Democrat Bill Clinton, who pushed for health care reform as president in 1993. Carville says current opposition to reform from the far right is polarizing Washington and points to the contents of the health care bill as evidence.
What they passed was essentially the same thing the Heritage Foundation proposed in 2003, which is the biggest conservative foundation in Washington. Same thing basically Romney passed in Massachusetts. And all of a sudden, the definition of radical keeps changing. Well, one radical 7 years ago or 5 years ago is radical today.
The greatest strides in this country were made in hyper-partisan periods.
Mary Matalin is a Republican political consultant who was an assistant to President George W. Bush. Matalin sees past and current partisanship as healthy for democracy.
People should stand on their principles. The bipartisanship, as it's defined in Washington by the majority party, is you do what we want to do, and we'll call it bipartisan. When Republicans stand on their principles or conservatives stand on their principles, then it's, they're anti-government. So it depends who's defining bipartisanship, but the Washington definition for the moment is not bipartisanship, it's about democratic control.
In March, every single Republican member of the House voted against the health care reform legislation pushed by Democratic President Barack Obama. And last year, the president's stimulus bill passed without a single House Republican vote. Louisiana's Republican freshman, U.S. Representative Bill Cassidy, defends the GOP against being called the party of no.
For so long, the president said that Republicans were offering no ideas when it came to health care. And then he got up in his State of the Union speech and started to incorporate Republican ideas, saying, well, I've taken this from Republicans, I've taken that from Republicans. And so that was basically an admission that the idea that Republicans were not offering ideas was false. That said, if you are going to ask Republicans to support a bill which raises taxes by $500 billion, that is going to destroy as many as 5 million jobs, that is going to intrude into the personal life of Americans as government has never done before, Republicans are going to say no to that.
Louisiana's U.S. Democratic Senator Mary Landrieu faced partisan attacks after she cast a crucial vote, helping to move the health care bill forward. When it was revealed she had secured funds in the bill to remedy a faulty federal Medicaid reimbursement to the state, she received GOP criticism nationwide.
Is that enough to secure Ms. Landrieu's vote, the $100 million, or do you think that's just a going-in proposition?
Republican Governor Bobby Jindal, who had requested the fix, only came to her defense once. Republican Senator David Vitter not only opposed the bill, but joined conservative critics, who said Landrieu had sold her vote.
That was an instance clearly that these two individuals put the interest of their party politics above the benefit of the state. And thank goodness they lost and the other side, our side, won, because Louisiana's budget has now been basically given a reprieve of another $300 million in cuts, which would be devastating to our universities going into this budget year.
Landrieu feels that reapportionment is partially to blame for what she sees as the lack of bipartisanship in the House.
So there are very few House members, for instance, that actually represent a district that has 50% Republicans or 50% Democrats, or 50% white, 50% African American, or a third Hispanic, a third white, a third African American. You don't get many districts like that. So the legislators themselves are polarized by their own constituents.
Former Democratic State Senator Randy Ewing says that polarization has begun to creep in at the state capitol level.
It was not as bad several years ago, but through the way that we have drawn our legislative districts and the way we have polarized our populations, and because of the various issues that many times that are not the main issues, but they are very emotional, I do think that you see more and more of the partisan effect on politics.
So how well does the legislature represent the state? Currently, while only 64% of Louisiana's population is white, 81% of all legislators are white. Males account for nearly 49% of the state's residents, but 84% of the legislature. And in a state where 51% of registered voters identify themselves as Democrat, 26% as Republican, and 23% as independent, the House is almost evenly divided. With the exception of 2 vacancies, there are 50 Democrats, 50 Republicans, and 3 independents. With a number of issues coming from the governor's office that will require 70 votes, bipartisanship will be especially important this session.
It's going to definitely take us working together to be able to solve this. And not just us, but the House working together with the Senate and working with the governor's office. This is going to take a full-fledged frontal attack from all of us, I think.
Representative Noble Ellington is a Democrat from Winsboro. He says the goal of unity was slightly derailed at the beginning of the session in a power play that crossed party lines. Republican House Speaker Jim Tucker handed out retribution to members who broke their promise to vote for his choice for Speaker pro tem, Independent Joel Robideau, but voted instead for Ellington. Even Ellington felt Tucker's wrath.
I was taken off of House and Governmental Affairs, which was fine with me. And in my talk that day, I asked the Speaker, if anybody had to be punished, let it be me. But I had several of my colleagues that voted with me that I felt like were 2 that were removed from the Appropriations Committee and 1 that was removed from House and Governmental Affairs. And these were committees that they really wanted to be on.
Tucker says what he did was nonpartisan, since he disciplined both Republicans and Democrats. What's important, the Speaker says, is moving the state forward.
It's not about my personal feelings one way or the other. It's about moving an agenda forward. And no matter what that agenda is, people are going to vote on it before the day is over, and they're going to vote the way they want their districts to vote. And I think that's what's most important about why democracy is far stronger than politics. It's about moving an agenda forward and getting things done, and we're going to do that this year.
Well, joining me to move our discussion forward are our audience members. They include Baton Rouge area residents who are randomly recruited and surveyed for us by LSU's Public Policy Research Lab. We also have a member of the Legislative Youth Advisory Council. Of those who responded to our pre-show survey question about party affiliation, 39% identified themselves as Democrat, 34% as Republican, and 19% as independent. Comparing politics in Louisiana to Washington, 42% of those surveyed don't see much difference in the amount of partisanship between the two. A close percentage, 38%, say that Louisiana politics are less partisan than those in D.C. and 19% of respondents feel Louisiana politics are more partisan than Congress. When asked if they felt that they had little or no say in Louisiana state politics, a large majority of those surveyed, a total of 63%, either agreed or strongly agreed. A total of 30% disagreed or strongly disagreed that they had little or no say, and 7% were neutral. When asked about the process for making decisions at the state capitol, an overwhelming number of respondents, 69%, feel that the process is broken and needs to be fixed, while 20% thinks that the process works pretty well. So let's start with the election process. Do you think that campaigns set the tone for the whole political process? When we campaign, are we setting ourselves up for partisan politics as we govern? Are campaigns flawed in some way? Jack?
I think because there's so much money involved that it is.
Money is the root of the problem, Chad. I see you nodding your head. Money is the problem?
Well, I just think it's ridiculous. You know, one candidate spends so many millions and millions of dollars, and the people at home are scratching just to get by, man. I think it's ridiculous.
So is it the money that goes into the campaign, or is it the money that our politicians end up
money period.
Money period.
Money for the sake of the other. They put money in the campaign so that they can do the other shenanigans after they're in office.
Now you said the shenanigans once they're in office. What kind of shenanigans? I mean, you know, we've got Republicans and Democrats, but they're all our elected officials, aren't they?
Like passing the Patriot Act, and a lot of the legislation in that Patriot Act it's not, the Founding Fathers would be considered terrorists under the Patriot Act, and yet they call it the Patriot Act. So it's a lie right on its face.
Now, you bring up a point that I've always wondered about. We call bills different things. We call each other liars. We say that programs are socialist or anti-government. Does that affect the way our politicians act and our relations with them? Robert?
No, our politicians say do anything to get them elected.
Then why do we elect them?
Because we are gullible fools, and we get the government we deserve.
Okay.
Nobody else runs.
You agree. You say we get the government we deserve?
Well, because people who are credible and who can actually articulate and will do the positive change tend to not win because they don't get the financial money and the backing. And what happens in politics, if you don't have the money, they say it's not about the money, but you can't run ads, you can't send flyers. So if we start making our political process less about who has the better commercials and who are actually articulating the ideas and changes we want to see in our government, we can start to move in a positive direction, I think.
But can't we get those ideas from sound bites? I mean, do we need to read a whole book or website or party platform, Janice?
No, I just think it's a clown show. I think that we've gone into the circus and we're not talking about the issues. We're not talking about what needs to be discussed. A lot of Americans are weighing in on opinions about different issues, and they really don't even have a background or a concept of what they're talking about. And we're making decisions of foolishness.
Mary, when she said clown show, I saw you agree. We're in the clown show?
I think so. I think so. Mainly because what happens is they say one thing and we believe it. They talk so pretty when they're campaigning, and we think, well, this person is on track. And as soon as they're elected, then you see the other side.
Thomas?
I think they're persuasive and good actors. They manage to gain the confidence of the people through their smoothness of presenting whatever issue it is, usually inflated by emotions and etc.
But we keep re-electing them. So I understand making the mistake once, but we shouldn't re-elect people. Angela?
I think it gets towards the end of the campaign, they start throwing a lot of mud and dirt, and then you might change your decision based upon something that may not be true.
Okay, so we've got some mudslinging. Gail.
Well, there are two issues: campaign financing, and also political consultants will tell a candidate they must go negative if they wish to win the election. So it's in the nature of both of those issues that really impact a campaign. People may have when they go into politics, a very clear sense of being a public servant. It's also the responsibility of the electorate to be informed, to really get more involved and understand issues, and then decide what candidate. So it's a joint responsibility between those people who are running for office and then those people who are a part of the electorate. That's what democracy depends upon, an informed electorate.
Well, now, a part of being an informed electorate is sometimes disagreeing. And it seems like we've had a lot of disagreement recently. We've got 48% thinking one way and 48% thinking another way. Is that healthy for the country, or should we all agree more? Melanie?
Absolutely. What I hear is people who really seem to have a jaded opinion about politics, and there really is so much to be commended in Louisiana politics today. When I first came to Louisiana, it was after the hayride, but it was in 1963. I had never been to this state before, and I was in culture shock. And that was very, very interesting to me, but it was a circus then. To me, the circus has stopped, and more people are being more genuine, and they are expressing their opinions, and I think a difference of opinion is not only good, but it's absolutely necessary to a democracy, and we cannot take that away from people. That's what a democracy does. That's what our soldiers fight for, and that's what we as teachers try to instill in our students, that it's an important thing to participate and to disagree.
Well, Brenda, can we disagree without being so disagreeable? Or sometimes that disagreeable nature, does that help us more with politics? And so if we need to have this balance.
It's good to disagree, but we have to remember to respect one another, respect each other's opinions. We all come from different backgrounds, so we're not going to have a homogeneous opinion of everything. So we have to keep that in mind.
Okay.
And remember the best interests of everybody, not just your special interests or thinking that your opinion is right and everything, that the people that you know should have things the way they want it first.
Well, earlier in the survey, some of you guys expressed some concern that you didn't have much control over government, that once we elect our officials, then they go off and they do things that may not be in our interest. Kenneth?
Yeah, I think the big problem is that our elected officials have forgotten that they serve us, and they're supposed to be public servants, as it was said previously. But that's not what happens. They think they're in charge, and we work for them rather than them working for us. And I think that's one of the big problems we have right now.
Thomas, you are nodding your head. You agree?
Yeah, absolutely. The quote politicians are representatives of the people. The people elected them to do a specific thing. They say they're going to do this specific thing. And then, all right, no more taxes. They get elected, and the first thing you see is that hidden thing come out and slap you in the face. Another tax put on something. The big debate right now in the national scene is the health care problem. And with that going on and the bipartisanship going by the wayside, everybody's voting party lines. Who do we trust?
Who do we trust? Mary?
Well, service has gone out of public service is what it's about. When you're elected, on most bodies, they'll say, pledge to the allegiance, pledge to the flag, which should ground people to make them know that they are serving. And then most bodies, they'll do a prayer. But after that's over, it's almost as if everybody go back into the individuality of it and do what they can do, but I think the service is what's important. When you take a position like that, you need to remember that you're serving. You're not being glorified, and service is hard. But and to do that, you need to stay rooted in your Constitution, and in prayer and God. That's my personal feeling about that.
And more, excuse me, okay, and more of the politicians that I've known and watched on the television, listened to, read on the internet, they're in it for the power. And the power is coming from where? Money, sex. We've had enough of that immorality running around. Why do we keep re-electing these people when we should say enough is enough? Why can't we stop it? Because they are charismatic people, they have good speaking voices, they look good, they're connected politically, they have money. Everybody just falls in line.
But I thought you said that we have some power, but then it also seems that you're saying that we don't have any power, that if you're connected politically and you're relatively slick in your message, then you get elected. But I thought we said earlier that it was our power. And then, Janice, I thought you were...
It's supposed to be.
It's supposed to be. What can we do? How do we get the power, bring the power back?
First thing I think we need to do is turn off cable television. I watch C-SPAN, I watch your show, LPB, but when you're sitting down and you're watching Keep Overman at night, Rachel Maddow at night, which I do, and you're listening to Rush Limbaugh on the way to work, you're kind of lazy. You don't look at programs that's going to give you the fact. You get into all this stuff, abortion care, and you get into all this deaf panels, and then it gets to be a buzzword, and then the politicians pick it up.
The spin doctors.
You've got to hold these people accountable, these politicians. You have to hold them accountable. We have got to educate ourselves. When you say about the power, we have got to educate ourselves on the facts. We've got to take time. Obama, whatever his name is, Obama, he says he's going to post a bill. If he posts a bill, print it out. If you don't want to waste paper, read it. Educate yourself on what you're paying these people to do. I don't understand a politician to go into politics and 3 years later he's a millionaire. I need to go into politics because we're suffering out here, and the party lines need to stop. You need to start looking out for the people, whether you will support the bailout, whether you don't support the bailout. You need to support us. We need to make sure these politicians are doing what they're supposed to do for us.
Well, no, I can't guarantee getting straight answers from all politicians, but we're going to have some guests right here in a couple of seconds that we can get some good answers from. And so when we return, we're going to be joined by a panel of experts to further discuss politics and whether politics is destroying democracy. Welcome back to Louisiana Public Square. We're discussing politics and democracy. Joining us now is our panel of experts. Bob Mann holds the Manship Chair in Mass Communication at LSU. Mann served as Communications Director for Democratic Governor Kathleen Blanco and for 17 years was Press Secretary for U.S. Democratic Senator John Breaux. Charlie Buckels is Vice President of the Republican Party of Louisiana. He also has served as Treasurer of the State Party, an elected delegate to 2 national conventions, and was a member of the 2008 Presidential Electoral College. Michael McHale has been Vice Chairman of the Louisiana Democratic Party since 2008. Prior to that, he was President of the Young Democrats of Louisiana and Executive Vice President of the Young Democrats of America. Sally Nungesser heads Nungesser Consulting, a fundraising firm for Republicans, and she has raised more than $8 million for Governor Bobby Jindal and is currently raising funds for the re-election campaigns of Congressman Steve Scalise and John Fleming. Let's go to our participants for their questions, and I think, Jack, you wanted to start us off with some questions about participation.
Yeah, I'd like to know how right now we're at 20 or 30% participation of our citizenry, in the general public electing our officials. How do we get that up to 50 or 60 or 70%? I think would be more, ideal. Like we'd have a more informed and more involved public, and I think our politics would be a little cleaner if more people got involved.
Bob?
Well, one of the things I think that I didn't hear in the discussion earlier that has a lot to do with it is the way the media, the news media, cover politics. In many ways, we treat it as a game, and I think the politicians treat it as a game. But I heard someone earlier talk about watching Keith Olbermann and the cable shows, where it is treated as a game. Hardball is one of the names of one of the shows that's most popular. And so I think a lot of people look at politics today and they say it has no relation to my life. It's just people playing their power games or their money games or whatever, and they tune out. That's not the only reason, but I think the way the media cover politics has a whole lot to do with it.
I think you'll see if you look back at the recent presidential elections, there's been a very strong turnout. In fact, some of the largest votes that we've had in many presidential years. But I think what is going to turn people more out is to get into the individual politics of expressing our views more, especially at the local level, where you have a low turnout typically, or it would be in local elections. Many times tax elections, school board members, that's where you find very low turnouts. And I think that's something that it will bode well for our overall democracy if we can get a better turnout at the local level, and sometimes that's off the radar. We always like to get involved in the big national elections, and we turn aside the elections where we live, and I think that's got to change.
Jack, I think the way you do it is with people like Devontae right there. I think that if you get young people involved, I mean, if you look at right now in any election, the lowest group age-wise that votes is the 18 to 25-year-olds. They just don't seem to think that politics actually affects them and has really anything to do with their life. But look, those are the people who the decisions we make today are going to affect the most. Those are the people when we start talking about college tuition, when we start talking about the environment, when we start talking about the economy. You know, look, a lot of us, our time's limited, but they're the ones it's really going to affect. But I think through things like this, through really and truly encouraging young people to get involved and to show them, whether through the schools or whoever, but to show them how on a day-to-day basis the politics that goes on, the elections that are made, the decisions that are made today are going to affect them in the long run. And that's not an easy job to do. I mean, people have been trying to get young people to vote for a long time, but to me, if you're really and truly you want to start talking about it, start with the young generation and let it go from there.
At what age?
I'd say, start educating kids in high school. But, they can vote whenever they're 18. But, look, I think in every high school they ought to have voter registration drives, again and again throughout the year that show these kids how important it is, and not just during election years, during presidential election years, like, Charlie was saying that's kind of the big deal. But you make it every year, every time that let these kids know, look, this is about you. It's not about, the older generation. It's about you, and these things are going to affect you, and you got to get involved.
I agree. I think it ought to start at pre-K or something, not high school.
What's that? Yeah, and I think this is kind of a practical answer to your question more than the big picture. It'd be nice if everybody was really involved. I think what happens is your older generation votes more, and I was reading an article recently and they were saying they also give money more to candidates. They support candidates financially and they also vote more often, and younger people don't. And I think one of the reasons why is they're so busy. They're trying to figure out what their career is going to be. They're going to school, they're working part-time to pay for college, and then once they get out of college they're having kids, they're driving carpool. I think we need to have less elections, and that's going to mean we're going to have longer ballots. They're going to be more complicated, but I think especially the younger generation is going to be able to handle that. They've learned how to handle the computer and their PDAs, and they can handle a lot of things, and they can multitask. So I think they'll be good at handling longer ballots, and we don't need to have a special election on a tax that maybe, that's only the taxes on the ballot and there's nothing else on the ballot. I think if we had less elections, we may be able to get more people's attention and actually turn them out and get them to the polls. So that's more a practical answer, but I think young people would agree. They're just too busy to go vote 6 and 7 times a year.
You and old folks are going to agree with that, because when I moved here 20-something years ago, my thought was, my God, how many elections do they have? I mean, what do they have to have one every week for? It seemed like it just never quit. It just went continuously from one particular Senate election to the governor's election to the school board's election. Everything just continued constantly.
And I think it contributes to our cynicism because sometimes it looks like they're putting one thing on the ballot so nobody does show up so that they can control the election more. So I think it would improve our feeling that we have power over things too, to have it all on one ballot where we can educate ourselves really well once a year. Because if this isn't your business, you know, if you've got other things to do in your life, it's very hard to keep up with everything and know what you think and who you want to vote for.
Now, Gail, you said it's also there. It's that maybe there's some things that distract us or take our attention away from maybe some of the core issues. You had a question about TV.
Well, and that was brought up by Bob, the fact that commercial TV and radio are espousing many shows particular ideology and demonizing the opposition. I think that is really providing a very toxic atmosphere in this country. I'm concerned about the effect it's having on our system of government, which is relatively new, of 230 years that we've had this governmental experiment. And it's important that we preserve the best form of government in this world. So my question would be, how can we stop this anger, this mistrust of government, and have some sort of influence in the media to present balanced programs like we're doing tonight, to get across various points of view to the public?
And how do we do it? I mean, Charlie and Michael, you guys aren't fighting each other, and you're sitting right next to each other. Most times when I watch TV, you guys, or Republicans and Democrats, fight each other.
That's going to come later.
Okay.
Well, you know, obviously we're in the information age today, and it's so easy to get information out and communicate with each other today that we weren't doing, you know, even 10, 15 years ago. But, you know, one of the premises here is what's going on today. Is it putting our democracy at peril? And I don't think so. I really think it's improving our situation. You know, thank God we had founding fathers that began our system with the rights of the people, and it is through that we have persevered through all kind of political movements, right and left, and our institutions that we have today will keep our system from going well right and well left. And I think that's still in place today. We see a lot of people, of course, you know, we hear about the proverbial Tea Party movement. I think it's healthy for our society. You know, the reason that President Obama got elected was because, you know, his message reverberated with so many people out there, a lot of younger people, a lot of older people. Now, you know, from our perspective, I think the message he gave then and the way he's governing it is two different places, and that's giving rise to what you're seeing today across the nation of people saying, well, you know, I'm not sure that's what I understood at the time. But that's healthy because that keeps us. You know, we can go back, we can think of back at, I think it was in the Teddy Roosevelt, you know, that was a monumental shift in our nation when Teddy Roosevelt was elected to a system that he really wanted, almost a pure democracy out there today. It moved things way in one direction or the other, but our institutions keep us centered. And because we have all of this political, we can call it acrimony, I think it's healthy. I really do. Now, it's got to be within the bounds of certain our laws. I mean, it can't go violent. I mean, we look back at the 60s and the 70s where I grew up. I mean, you had the Weather Underground, you had very violent movements, you had people that bombed things out there today. We aren't, thank goodness, seeing a lot of that today within our society. So personally, I think it's healthy. I think people are smart enough today to eventually winnow out what they want in their political structure. And the discourse, certainly it gets acrimonious sometimes, but I don't see it being a threat to our society at all.
And this is where I'm going to kind of disagree with Charlie. To be honest, I think some of the stuff's going on right now is a threat to our society. I mean, you know, I think, you know, all the acrimony and the anger, that's all well and good until somebody gets shot. And I'm really afraid, you know, that's what's going to happen. And I think part of the deal, and I blame the media. And I'm not saying the media is right or left or blue or red. To be honest, I think the media is green. They do what's going to get ratings, what's going to bring them in money. And it's a whole lot more popular to watch a fight than to watch people holding hands and singing Kumbaya and getting things done. I mean, and now with the 24-hour media and so many different channels, and it's and the internet, and it's a constant beast that has to be fed, and everybody wants the next thing. Now, we're having a great discussion here, and I'm very excited to be here. But I tell you right now, if I picked up a chair and I hit Charlie over the head with it, I bet you LPB's ratings would go through the roof, and that's really sad. That says to me a lot about our society, and I think whenever we have all these voices out there that are really extreme voices, and there's extreme voices on both sides. Both sides, but but a lot of times the extreme, the louder you are, that's the more attention that you get. I mean, who would ever heard of a congressman during a State of the Union address yelling out to the President of the United States, "You lie"? I mean, whether you think it's it's not. You respect the office, and to me, it's that kind of uncivility that is really and truly, to me, is a danger to our country. If we get to where, look, we're going to run a Jerry Springer type democracy, and who yells the loudest, that's the one who gets things done. What politics should be and ought to be is the art of compromise, is the art of coming together.
No, we shouldn't compromise. Why would we have to compromise our own principles? Right. Bipartisanship means vote my way, please. Change your mind, change your principles. Don't do what you think is right in your heart. Do it my way.
And you'll notice it was the Democrat that threatened the first violence tonight, too.
Wow. I understand, but and I'm not saying. I mean, I'm not always right, and you're. But to actually get things done, I mean, if you and I, if this is where we want to go, but I'm starting here and you're starting here, somehow we're going to have to get to here. And I'm not, your basic principles and things you believe in.
Go there.
But to be able to get things done instead of just saying.
Why don't we just do nothing that term?
I think the Founding Fathers actually set it up where it's very hard to get anything done, and I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, because every time they get something done, it may limit our freedom more, and it may limit our ability to run our own lives, which they were very protective of. They wanted us to be first and foremost free to do what we thought was right. So having it be difficult is really a good thing, and having fights over whether we do anything at all and for things to fail is not always a bad thing. Sometimes it's just an indication that maybe we shouldn't go there, in my opinion.
Not all laws that are passed are good laws.
That's right.
Right.
They don't need to be there.
Well, Bob, I know you also, as a historian of this, is this different now than it was before? Are we in a different era?
No, in fact, it's a lot better than it used to be. The race between John Adams and Thomas Jefferson in 1880 was one of the nastiest, maybe only surpassed by the race between John Adams' son, John Quincy Adams, and his opponent, Andrew Jackson, when they were calling each other murderers. And Abraham Lincoln was vilified, and people used words against him that would cause half of us to swoon if we heard them spoken about our president today. Our politics have always been rough and tumble and vicious in many ways from the very founding of our democracy. So I think sometimes we don't express enough faith in our democracy, how resilient it is. We treat it as so fragile that dissent somehow threatens our democracy. And I think, again, I don't want to be beating up on the press, but I think the press is culpable in two ways. First of all, it accentuates the dissent. It encourages it. What Mike said is exactly right. If he threw a chair and hit Charlie over the head with it, it would do a lot for the ratings. But the next thing the press would do would be talk about how awful it is that we have this fighting going on, this dissent. Well, they're the ones who are facilitating it, and then when it happens, they talk about it as if it's a threat to democracy. It's either one or the other. It can't be both, and yet the press is at the center of both ends of that debate. I think we need to, in this country, not be unconcerned about the incivility. I'm not arguing that we need less civility, but I am suggesting that it is our democratic tradition to have rough and tumble fights and rough and tumble arguments, and we ought to celebrate that in some ways. We ought to celebrate it. We're a vibrant democracy because we have the right to shout at each other.
Okay.
I think what we're talking about is freedom and responsibility.
Absolutely.
But we want freedom, but we don't want to be responsible. And freedom is not free. We pay for it every day. And I think that's our big problem. We want to be free to do what we want. We don't want to be responsible. Now, Pogo said, "We have met the enemy, and they is us," and that's kind of what's happening.
Well, and along that line, if we're concerned, we need to be concerned about our institutions of government. No doubt about that. But remember, we are basically designed to be a free society and free people, and sometimes I think we take ourselves a little too seriously from the political standpoint. And like I said, it gets exacerbated. It gets into the political correctness and all of these things. And our society is built on individual freedom and individual initiative, and not the fact that all good and perfect things come from government. It's just the other way around. And I think when we take that too seriously, and like I said, the people serving in office think they have all the power in the world, when it's really the people that have the power. And that expressing of the people today is really the power that you're seeing, not the power of government, but the expressing of the people today.
I don't know, Chad.
Our forefathers built an awesome prototype, and I'm grateful that I'm in this country. But I think that, okay, everybody's supposed to meet in the middle, but we spend one term or two terms going off this way, and then we fight back to get back to the middle for another president. It just seems like we go back and forth too much. It seems like we weren't based on a two-party system, but we, for some reason, decided to jump in two different canoes. It just seems like everybody can see where, I might be going a little bit overboard on this situation, but nobody backs down anymore. Humility should be a big part in politics, I think.
I saw Sally, you were shaking your head. No, you didn't think that we should meet in the middle.
No. And I think that that's the genius of the system is that, for a while you put somebody in charge and they're going way off in the right or way off to the left, and you're going, oh, wait a minute, so I'm going to elect the next guys the next time. Because really the Founding Fathers didn't want us to go really far down any kind of road. They want individual initiative, and they want individual freedom, and they want us to build our country. They don't want the government to dictate what we do. They want us to dictate to the government. So they don't want the government to have this ability to race 90 miles an hour down the middle of the road. That's a bad thing. They're going to wreck the country if they ever get that kind of momentum. So
I think you're right, Chad. I mean, it has zigzagged, but the one deal, throughout American history, we've been going left and right, but at the same time, we're still going forward the whole time that we're doing it. And some of the, and I think particularly today, I mean, all the discussion about Democrat, Republican, red, blue, all that kind of stuff. Look, it wasn't too long ago, the entire Louisiana congressional delegation, they had a deal that if any of them, whether a Democrat or Republican, if they had a fundraiser, they'd all attend. Didn't matter if they were a Democrat or a Republican. I mean, because those guys put Louisiana first, and all that party politics was second. And to be honest, I think if we get back to that kind of spirit, that, sure, you're a Republican, I'm a Democrat, but we're both representing Louisiana and what's best for Louisiana, not what's best for my party or your party. And Washington's gotten to the point, I mean, used to be you'd fight like cats and dogs all day, but at night, hey, how's the wife and kids? Or, let's go drink a beer together. And you don't have that anymore. And to be honest, I think, a lot of problems have been solved by a couple of guys having a beer together, but the fact that we don't get to that point anymore, that it's all, well, I can't talk to you, you're a Republican, or I can't talk to you, you're a Democrat. That, and to me, I think that's a relatively new phenomenon. And that's, it scares me.
And Bob, I know you had some thoughts about that. I mean, have we changed?
I think we have in that respect. When I moved to Washington 25 years ago, I was working for Russell Long, who was very good friends and neighbors with a lot of his colleagues. And it wasn't that long before that the members of Congress went to Washington, and they pretty much stayed there the whole time they were in session. They were only in session half the year, so they spent basically half the year at home and half the year in Washington. And when they were in Washington, they were together, and they got to know each other as human beings. They might be Republican versus Republicans, but they were friends and neighbors, and they saw each other as people that they had to deal with because they were with them all the time. Now they fly back and forth. They're in Washington maybe 3.5 days. They're flying back to DC, back to their districts to raise money, and then they rush back to D.C. They vote. They only get to know people who are actually on their committees or maybe who are next door to them in the office building. Other than that, every other member of Congress is almost a rank stranger. And I think we've got to get back to the days when they actually got to know each other as colleagues and not enemies, because there is too much enmity. If we want to get things done, if we want to actually accomplish something in Washington, we should be able to encourage vigorous debate. But at the end of the day, there ought to be some room for you and I to sit down and say, okay, what do we agree on, and let's at least do that. And I think we've lost the ability, or we're losing the ability to do that because of the enmity that's developed and the estrangement that's developed between members of Congress of opposite parties, and in many cases the same party.
Janice?
I want to get back to what the two guys said that were strategists. As a black woman, as a psychiatric nurse, I'm not going to say my party affiliation because you wouldn't believe it. I'm offended by the Tea Party. You say you think that's healthy. I don't think that's healthy when the first African-American First Lady goes into the White House and they're portraying her as a monkey. We find that very offensive. As a psych nurse, I'm very concerned because I don't hear black people saying anything, and that scares me. That scares me because I'm thinking, what are they thinking? I work with a 90% African-American, 99% African-American workforce. The comments I hear, it's just a matter of time before somebody explodes, like you were saying, you lie. That was very disrespectful. Black folks are taking that in. People don't know how to handle those things. I can look at it and say, oh, the silly folks, they're in charge. That's who the media go to. When Glenn Beck says something way out, when Rush Limbaugh says something far out, I'm wondering, Mitch McConnell, when are you going to say something about this? When are you going to denounce this? And then the Democrats, they get all incensed. All this junk that's going on to me is about who's going to get in 2011, 10, 12, 2010, November. Everything is about, when is it? Everything's about November. What they're going to do November. We need help now. People are starving. We elected them not to worry about the next election and who's going to be in control, because none of them are doing anything. We need to fire all of them. That's what a bailout needs to be, down in Congress.
Well, you know, one of the things that
every state, because it's not fair to states that don't have term limits.
Every
state's got to have term limits.
Well, elections are term limits.
Right, they are. And you know, we hear a lot. You know, okay, what do our politicians need to do? What does Washington need to do next? We tend to today view our lives in many cases as, okay, our life is going to be determined by what Washington, D.C. is going to do next, what's happening in the legislature today. And, you know, I just respectfully disagree, like, with the Tea Party movement, things like that. And I have, you know, I've been to several I'm not, quote, a member. I'm not sure there is a membership. But, you know, what I've seen in the Tea Party movement is people that are just very fearful of what government is doing in their lives today, you know. And I see nothing wrong with that. Now, I don't care, in any group you're going to have somebody that's going to go off and say something stupid about somebody, but you see what we get characterized with is that particular thing, not the movement itself. I mean, I'm sure there's groups of people that would like to view more government in our lives, and certainly they have the right to get out and assemble.
We want government to be there.
Well,
I don't
exactly.
understand
You
the
know,
process
there are certain things that government should do and
anymore.
can do better. There's no doubt about that. You mentioned something that, well, we're never designed to be a two-party nation. Okay. Well, in fact, there was, in the early days, there was even some danger about there being, quote, parties. But what if you boil down, let's say, our two main Republican parties, it's political philosophy is what it is. It's a view that government should be more involved in our lives and be more involved with more laws and constructionists, and the view that there would be less government. So that's where you are really in the political.
Yeah, wait, I got to get in on that one, because I think that was kind of an unfair deal. But no, I mean, and I do think that problems with, like, you know, the Tea Party movement, or whenever people are saying just, you know, really extreme things out there, it gets kind of scary, and I think, look, we all want, at the end of the day, we all want clean air and healthy babies. You know, everybody wants the same thing. We all want a vibrant economy. We all want, you know, jobs. Yeah, we all want jobs. But, you know, where we disagree is, all right, how do we get there?
Exactly.
And you know, like saying, look, I may have an idea how to get there, and you may have a different idea how to get there, and we may not agree on every part of it, but if there's some parts of it that we do agree on, rather than just sit and do nothing, well, then let's do that. And I think, Charlie's characterization, one party's for less government, the other party's for more government. Look, the reason why I'm a Democrat is, I've always believed, and I would never ever, one of the things that really scares me about what's going on now, and you'll see some people on both sides, they'll question somebody's patriotism because they don't agree with them. It's we the people, not me the people. Right. It's not just my opinion, it's everybody's. And look, I think Charlie's a great guy. I think Sally's a wonderful woman. I would never, question that about any of them. But there's people out there. I drove in from Lake Charles today, and just listening on the radio, listening to talk radio, I heard people, certainly questioning that. Even question certain people's citizenship. And I think, things like that really aren't helpful to us.
Well, yes. And when I hear that members of Congress have been threatened and received death threats because of a vote, to me that has gone way over the line. And when I hear about paramilitary groups that are targeting through hatred and through mischief that they might do individuals or possibly institutions, I think we've gone way over the line. We do have a toxic problem in this country, and it has got to be addressed. The voice of moderation is not to be heard. It's one extreme or the other. And we need people, leaders, who will step forward and say, enough. There is a voice of moderation that needs to be spoken.
In Louisiana, I wonder if we also do. You hear it on the national level. Is that the kind of concern that we also have on the state level? But Bob,
well, I just want to say, let's be honest here. The Congress we have did not happen by immaculate conception. Right. There's not one member of the House of Representatives who is there because he or she was appointed by anyone. Every member of Congress in the House was elected by constituents. Almost every member of the Senate, except for the few who have been appointed to fill unexpired terms, were elected by the people of their states. Right. The citizens have some responsibility for these people. They're there. Some of them have been there for 6 or 7 terms. If we hate to send the same people back so many times, then quit electing them. We've got to take responsibility for the fact that there aren't any moderates left in the House or the Senate. How did that happen? Well, they retired, and we elected people to the left and to the right of the people they replaced. And so these divisions didn't just happen. They got there because people voted them in. And we've got to take responsibility for that, all of us.
But there's fewer people going into politics for a good reason. Because if you cheated on your 3rd grade math test, somebody's going to bring it out and they're going to out you with it. Right. There are fewer and fewer honest people going into politics for a very, very good reason. Absolutely. Who wants to be dragged through the mud and smeared over a problem that you had 61 years ago?
And so how do you deal with that? As a consultant, are you getting good people who want to get involved?
Oh, I think there's some excellent people who are involved today, on both sides in Louisiana, on both sides of the aisle. I think we've got some, the legislature, I think, is really a capable legislature, and I think they are working on really good things now. I've seen a vast improvement in the 30-some-odd years that I've been involved. I think that the quality of people there is actually better than when I first got there. And I think and somebody said, well, we're more partisan in Louisiana now. I disagree. I think that what happened is it's now about party, but it always was about something. Right. And I think Bob will agree with me from a historical viewpoint. When I got to the Capitol, I was working for Dave Treen, and we were the reformers. It was keep it clean with Treen because Edwards was perceived to be corrupt. Before that, there were the long and the anti-long factions. So there were always two sides. It seems like, so I guess in response to why do we have two parties, I think we're always going to have people are going to join one side or the other in order to make their voices louder on issues that are important to them. They're going to join the party that's going to make their particular issue stand up for them on their particular issue, so their voice becomes a little bit louder on an issue they really care about. So there'll always be two sides, whether it'll always was Whigs and Whigs and Tories in the beginning, whether it'll always be Republican or Democrat. I think there'll always, though, be two, the way that the Founding Fathers set up the government.
Can we get more women involved in that balance?
It would be better if you did do that.
I agree, absolutely.
Again, it goes back to
the financing of a campaign.
That's
It
right.
takes a lot of money to get elected to office.
And I find that women, we're very critical of each other. You know, we're never good enough, we're never smart enough. And I think, you know, and I'm going to bring up a toxic name right now, but, you know, I think that they judge women, Sarah Palin, on a different standard than they would deal with a man. No matter what you think of her, I think if she was a man, there would have been different things said about her intelligence and whether she was good enough or whether she was, you know, smart enough to be president. I think that there have been some men who ran for president who were less qualified than she was, and they did not receive the same scrutiny. They did not get asked the same questions about what books they read and that kind of thing. Fortunately, those guys didn't win, but you know, I'm thinking that, you know, we've got to be a little bit more fair with women when we're talking.
Well, actually, I understand, but I want to be fair, but we've also got to be fair with the clock. And so, fortunately, we've run out of time, but we want to thank our panelists, Mr. Mann, Mr. Buckels, Mr. McHale, and Ms. Nungesser. When we come back, we'll have a few closing comments.
A good discussion?
Always run out of time.
Does it make you want to run for office?
It does. It does. It makes you want to get involved. And
well, I think we need more women.
We do. We do.
Absolutely. That's what we determined, I think. Well, that's all the time we have for this edition of Louisiana Public Square. We encourage you to take this month's survey on politics and democracy by visiting us at lpb.org/public square. While you're there, check out a link to a special series on National Public Radio, Trust in Government, the Season of Discontent. We'd also love to get your feedback on tonight's topic. Post a comment like several viewers did following last month's show on higher education's challenges and opportunities. About cuts to higher ed, Sherry wrote, "It would be much more equitable to cut government spending across the board by 0.5% to 1%. And Robert says, top standards are too low and too much public money is wasted on underprepared students. People had ways to pay for college before TOPS was created, and those ways of paying for college are all still available." Well, the future of the TOPS scholarship program and ways to make budget cuts more flexible are two issues expected to get a lot of attention this legislative session. Remember, you can track the legislature every night on LPB's Capitol Beat at 6:57 and 9:57.
Well, we talked about politics tonight. What better way to follow up than with a show about religion? Join us next month as we explore the role that religion plays in public life on Church and the Bayou State, Religion in Louisiana. Thanks for watching, and good night.
Good night.
For a copy of this program, call 1-800-973-7246 or go online to www.lpb.org. Support for this program is provided by the men and women of the Louisiana Forestry Association. Through sustainable forestry, LFA members promote the health and productivity of Louisiana's forests for generations to come. And the Foundation for Excellence in Louisiana Public Broadcasting.